Let it go, make my body go, make our bodies higher.
No matter how long you've been using Excel, no doubt the question has occurred to you, what is Excel all about? What's it used for? Excel is frequently described as a spreadsheet package, and that it is, but it's certainly that and a lot more as well. We're seeing a small worksheet here. Maybe this is a small business just getting started. We're tracking sales and expenses. We might be dealing with a larger budget, a projection for a few years out. What's going to happen a few years from now? You're tracking revenue, cost of goods, expenses. It can be quite complex, much more involved. On the other hand, Excel is often used for maintaining large lists of data. This might be a list of our customer database. Maybe it's a few thousand rows here. We might keep track of our employees. Maybe we've got another worksheet here that keeps track of inventory. Any kind of list management you might want to do with this, for example, sort the data, filter it. Excel has a rich set of data management tools available to you. Sometimes you're viewing data and it's just not effective until you've got a chart. It's easy to create charts in Excel as well. Here's a column chart describing the data to the left of it. Excel also has a great feature called a pivot table. We've got row after row of transaction data on the left side of the screen here. Let's analyze it. A pivot table without formulas can quickly come up with some good solid analysis of what's going on. That's about 1,000 rows of data there. Here's the big picture. Also built into Excel, a rich set of functions. We see financial type functions, math and trig type functions, more functions for those involved in statistical or engineering environments. All kinds of capability here. And if that weren't enough, we've got some additional formatting tools as well, using feature here called Smart Art. We can do specialized titles like we're seeing above our data here. We've got a built-in organization chart and some 200 other visual tools just like that. Excel, in one sense, also is nothing other than a giant grid of columns and rows. But what you can do with it varies widely. And just a quick look at some of the different examples we've seen here gives you some thoughts, some ideas on how we might use this powerful tool. Excel's menu system, pictured at the top of the screen here, consists of a series of tabs followed by a group of icons. The entire menu system is referred to as the ribbon. Now, it can be intimidating if you worry about all the different buttons and how you're going to be using this one or that one. Do I have to know this one? It's good to get familiar with a few of these, but not obsess or worry too much about how many there are. The most common tab that you'll be seeing on your screen as you work with Excel is going to be the Home tab. It's got a lot of formatting tools available on the left side here, including some related to numbers. Some additional command-type features to the right. There will be a few of these you'll never touch, others you will use frequently. Without going through all these, but just briefly looking at a few of them, the Insert tab, you can quickly see, includes some choices related to pivot tables, which you might have heard about. A section here on charts, something called spark lines, another kind of chart type, some filtering options, and some other features. Page layout, as you might guess, has a lot to do with printing, but also some other features, as you're working with objects possibly, and visuals. Formulas tab has a lot to do with formulas and a lot to do with functions, which are built-in formulas, capsule definition, and some other features here as well too. The Data tab contains some all-important data management tools, like sorting and filtering, and inserting some subtotals, and certainly some other features related to data management. Review tab you probably will not use as often, at least for a while, but you can see some of the features listed here, spell check, some protection features. And a View tab has a lot to do with some of the visuals. And again, as you slide over and look at these buttons, keep in mind, many of them you won't be using just yet. Some you'll use more often than others. I'm going to slide over this. What does that say? Pop-up tips help us at different times. Sometimes it whets our appetite. At other times it's simply something, well, I'm not sure what that means. Maybe I'll get to it later. But it is helpful as we look at the data here. Now, one of the tabs up here is different than the others. It's the File tab. I'm going to point with the mouse and click it. This takes us to what Microsoft calls the backstage view. Instead of handling information on an actual worksheet, what we're seeing here, for the most part, are features that have to do with file management, although print is here also. If we wanted to print this, we get some idea of what that's about to look like, and this is a feature relating, you might say, to the externals of the data you're working with. We might want to open a different file, or save this. We can get back into our standard use of Excel by either pressing Escape or this left arrow. You'll also notice too that on some of the tabs, I'm going to click Home again, since this is the most commonly viewed tab. In the lower right-hand corner of different sections here, you'll see little arrows. Here's one for font. Click this, as I'm doing here, and you'll see a dialog box. And this looks similar to features you might have seen in older versions of Excel. Those little buttons, by the way, are sometimes called dialog box launchers. That's what Microsoft calls them. But they expose us to different features that we might not be seeing here on the Home tab. Keep in mind, there are many, many popular features here on the Home tab. But in the font group, we see one of these little arrows. We also see one on the alignment group, one on the number group right here as well. We're more likely to see these on the Home tab than on some of the other tabs, but they take us behind the scenes to get to other features that are not as frequently used, let's say. So, for example, if we go to Insert, we don't see these except for charts. On Page Layout, we see one here, one there, and so on. So these get us back behind the scenes, so to speak. In the upper right, you'll see a choice related to how we view the tabs and the ribbon display options. The default view is what we're seeing right now, and throughout this course, you will see Show Tabs and Command. This is the default. We are now seeing the ribbon and the tabs on top of it. If we only want to show tabs, I'm going to click this right here with the left mouse button, we are just seeing the tabs. Now, we might want to work with the data this way for a while. Why? Maybe we're making a presentation. We want the focus to be on the data. We are seeing a few more rows. That's another advantage. How do we get back those ribbon icons? Upper right corner, click that button again. We can show tabs and commands. There's another option there where we can hide the entire ribbon, including the tabs. Ribbon display options, auto hide ribbon. And we don't see any of the command menu features at all at the top of the screen here. How do we get back? Slide to the very top of the screen and click. And there we are. And we can click here. Now notice how it disappears again. So click again. And if you want it to stay, go back to that button, Ribbon Display Options, and choose Show Tabs and Commands, or Show Tabs, whatever you wish. So we have the ability to move that out of the way from time to time. But again, the main idea as we work with Excel, we will be using many, many features. I think for most users, the Home tab is likely to be visible much of the time, well over half the time. And at different times, we do need to use other features. We click on different tabs and see some of the many options available there. The Excel ribbon menu system, very visual. Remember, anytime you slide over a button, a pop-up tip reminds you or explains to you what that button is used for. And if that were not enough, you can click the Tell Me More button and get a help screen to learn more about that particular feature. Above the ribbon menu system in the upper left corner of your screen is what's called the Quick Access Toolbar, sometimes abbreviated QAT. Initially, it has only 3 buttons in it: a Save button, an Undo button, and a Redo button. Undo, by the way, is extremely helpful if you've taken an action. Perhaps you've used a command, maybe that deletes data, and you've got all kinds of errors on your worksheet. You can easily undo your last action, but not only the last action, but lots of others as well. That's covered in a later movie. But here's the basic idea behind the Quick Access Toolbar. You can add to it. You can put buttons up here for features that you use frequently. Now, I'm going to take a simple example. Maybe you haven't even used Excel a whole lot, but you've recognized that here's an underline button right here. Maybe you don't know or overlook the fact that there's a keystroke shortcut. Suppose you're working with the data, and maybe you're using the Data tab here, using one of the features here, or you're on the Page Layout tab, and you want to apply underlining. What do you need to do? You need to go back to the Home tab to get to that feature. Every button in the ribbon menu system is a potential candidate for the Quick Access Toolbar. So using that simple example, here's what I'm saying. I need this button available all the time, because when I need it, I'm not always using the Home tab. So, by right-clicking this button, or any other button in the ribbon menu system, there's a choice called Add to Quick Access Toolbar. I'm going to choose it, and there we see Underline. So, maybe I am working on the Data tab, or working with some functions here on the Formulas tab. I want to apply underlining here. there's that button. I don't have to go back to the Home tab. Now, of course, if I knew the keystroke shortcut, we wouldn't need this here. Over time, you reassess, perhaps, the need for certain buttons. Maybe after a while, when I realize that Control-U is faster and maybe easier anyway, I don't need this here. So, right-click this button, remove from Quick Access Toolbar. There's a drop arrow on the right side. We can click this, and it's handy to have an open button. Might as well choose that one. There are some others out here you might want to choose from as well. Do you do spell check a lot? Activate that one. Remember, we can always remove these simply by right-clicking a button if we decide they're not very useful. And there's some others here as well. If you'd like to see additional buttons, you can also slide down to More Commands. And this opens a dialog box with a list of some popular commands. So maybe you're frequently using fill color. Now that's on the Home tab. We could have gotten to that otherwise, but here we see it as well. We can click Add, and now we see it here. The top-down order that we see here will correspond to the left-to-right order that we see in the Quick Access Toolbar. So I've added the Fill Color button. And if this were not enough, keep in mind we only see about 30 choices here. Here's a drop arrow, and we can choose Commands Not in the Ribbon. Now, as you become more experienced with Excel, you should check back here from time to time, maybe quickly sift through the list. Are there features in here, commands in here, that you'd like to have represented in the Quick Access Toolbar so they're available all the time? Just pick this one or that one. Maybe you found one here for query parameters. Add that. And if that were not enough, click the drop arrow. Here's a choice called All Commands. So tons of options here, over 1,000 choices here. Any one of these we could add to the Quick Access Toolbar. Here's one on data validation. Maybe that would be a good one to add, based on my experience using Excel. At some point, you click OK, and watch the idea here. Save, undo, redo, open, spelling, etc. As we see this moving downward, we're about to see these buttons across the top of the screen in the Quick Access Toolbar. And there we see them there. Remember, as you slide over these two, you get a description of what that feature does. Occasionally, a feature looks grayed out because you haven't selected data or done anything to make that feature available right now. And at a later time, as you reassess from time to time the feature that's there, you might right-click and say, you know, I don't really need this button here. Right-click and remove. There are times, too, when you want to change the left-to-right order here. You can simply right-click any button in the Quick Access Toolbar, customize the Quick Access Toolbar, and then consider, as we look at the top-down order here, remember that corresponds to the left to right order, maybe I want Save to be the rightmost button. So I'm going to click Save and move it down the list. Here's the down arrow here, and I'm moving it down the list, which in effect will mean moving it on the right side of the list as I click OK. At some point, you might find yourself using someone else's computer, or maybe someone else has left the office and you are now using that computer. Maybe the buttons that the other person has used are not ones that you will need. You could either get rid of them one by one, or consider another option. Right-click Quick Access Toolbar, Customize, and at the bottom here, Reset. Reset only Quick Access Toolbar. Are you sure you want to restore this to its default contents? Yes, and OK. And that's the way it looks when you first start Excel. Another option worth considering, right now on my screen I'm seeing 26 rows, a lot of empty rows, but sometimes you've got data there you'd like to see, maybe more, maybe less. You can put the Quick Access Toolbar below the ribbon. Now the main purpose of that is to make it closer to the data, but it might show you fewer rows. So I'm going to right-click the Quick Access Toolbar and show the Quick Access Toolbar below the ribbon. So before I do this, I'm looking at 26 rows on this worksheet. Now I'm seeing only 24. That's a downside of it, but on the other hand, the Quick Access Toolbar is closer to the data, and sometimes that's handy. In my experience in seeing how Excel people use this, I think about 90% of the users are keeping this above the ribbon. But do recognize that you have this option of putting it above or below the ribbon. So I'm going to right-click here on the Quick Access Toolbar now, show the Quick Access Toolbar above the ribbon. It's a more common location. A valuable tool, and the more you work with Excel, the more you'll find this handy. And from time to time, reassess the buttons that are there, optimize it for your use of Excel. There are certain Excel terms that we should use consistently. In Excel, a file is a workbook. A workbook is a file. And nearly always, we can use those two terms interchangeably. The current workbook is called 01-Getting Started. We see the name at the top of the screen. If you've just opened Excel, you're probably seeing a file with a temporary name, Book 1, possibly Book 2, something like that. Every workbook is comprised of at least one worksheet. Although the term spreadsheet is widely used by people who use Excel, officially and formally in Excel, every workbook has at least one worksheet in it. If you start a new workbook, it will have 3 empty worksheets in it. At the bottom of the screen, we see worksheet tabs. In this particular workbook, we've got a tab called Revenue Chart by Department. To the left of that, 2015 Home Products Revenue. Far off to the right, a Profits Sheet. These are worksheets, often abbreviated. We simply call them sheets. We can add sheets, we can delete sheets, we can move them, we can copy them. It's not uncommon for a workbook to have more than one active worksheet in it. Sometimes you'll see a workbook with a different sheet for each month, or possibly a different worksheet for each region for the organization that you work for, or a different worksheet for each state. So some workbooks have many, many worksheets. All worksheets essentially are alike, at least initially, and they are comprised of columns and rows. Columns are vertical. They're identified by letters. Rows are horizontal. They're identified by numbers. And we never want to use the two terms interchangeably. Columns are vertical, rows are horizontal. If I click on a cell here using the mouse, or possibly I use arrow keys on my keyboard, each time I use one of the arrow keys, or if I move the mouse and click with the left mouse button somewhere, I've selected a single cell. Every cell in Excel, on an Excel worksheet, has an address. Right now I'm in column K, row 3, therefore the address of that cell is K3. And in the upper left corner of a worksheet, you'll see the address listed there. This is called a name box where I'm circling with the mouse. That's cell K3. So by using arrow keys or simply moving the mouse and clicking somewhere, we're going to a different location. If I keep moving the arrow to the right here, we see how the column lettering scheme goes to the letter Z, and then we start AA, AB, and so on. Goes through the alphabet this way. And eventually we'll come to the end of the 2-letter scheme, and it goes to a 3-letter scheme. Now, if I start pressing right arrow, it's going to take me a long time to get to the far right. I'm going to hold down the Control key, and with it held down, I'll press right arrow. This is the last column in all Excel worksheets, column XFD. It would take you a while to figure out what that is numerically, but it's 16,384. That's how many columns we have in an Excel worksheet. If we want to go back to the upper left-hand corner in any worksheet, we can hold down the Control key and press the key called Home. And nearly always that'll take us over to cell A1. As I move down the screen leftward, pressing the down arrow, we see how the numbers keep going up and up and up. And it would really, really take me a long time to get to the bottom here if I were pressing arrows like this. I'll hold down the Control key and press the down arrow, and we see that the last row, 1,048,576. Every Excel worksheet has that number of rows in it. If you're wondering where that number comes from, it's actually 2 to the 20th power. All the underlying math and computers, of course, is binary, and that's where the number comes from. So an Excel worksheet is quite large, over 1 million rows, over 16,000 columns. Remember, at any time, to go back to the upper left corner, it's Control Home. In any worksheet, at different times and for different reasons, we can make columns wider or narrower, we can make rows taller or shorter. Every workbook has at least one worksheet, and we've got the same basic structure in every worksheet. Lots of rows, lots of columns. Again, the terms workbook refer to files. Files are workbooks, workbooks are files, and every workbook has worksheets within it, at least one. On an Excel screen, The area just below the ribbon is referred to as the formula bar. The formula bar right here contains information if the active cell contains information. If I click, for example, on cell B3, we see that it contains JAN. Now, the reason it's called the formula bar is if I press the down arrow on this worksheet here called profits, if I go down to cell B5, we see it's the value 100. Now, if I saw that and didn't go down to the next cell just yet, I'd say the cell below it has the value 20 in it. But as I push the down arrow, we see that cell B6 contains a formula. That's why it's called the formula bar. As you work with Excel, and maybe you haven't worked with it at all just yet, you get used to the idea of looking at the formula bar. Because as you move the active cell around, either by pressing arrow keys or pointing with a mouse and clicking somewhere, you want to know whether a cell contains a value or text or formula. And it becomes almost second nature as you work with Excel to look at the formula bar frequently. In much the same way that when you're driving, you look out your rear view mirror often. The formula bar is extremely useful to let you know what's going on. And as you open different workbooks and go to different worksheets that you've never seen before, you just get used to the idea of looking at this cell, that cell, to see where the formulas are. Now, there's some shortcuts and other tools for finding formulas, but always keep an eye on that formula bar. It gives you a good sense of what a worksheet is all about. At the bottom of the screen, below Sheet tabs, you'll see an area referred to as the status bar. Very often, you'll see the word Ready in the lower left corner. As you work with Excel, sometimes you take certain actions, maybe by mistake. Perhaps I've touched caps lock here. I didn't mean to do that. But I see in the lower left corner it says caps lock. Well, okay, I'll turn it off. It's a nice little indicator there. I also have a num lock button. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. If I press the num lock button, I might see an indicator there as well too. But there are other uses for the status bar as well. On this worksheet, it's called 2015 Home Products Revenue. If you're curious as to what the total revenue is here, you could click the column letter I. At the bottom of the screen, I'm seeing a few statistical measures here. This tells me what the average revenue is per item, the count of how many items, and actually the total revenue. That's valuable information. You can even see more here. If you right-click in the status bar, you will see a huge list of various entries. Now, some of these you might want to turn on or off. Maybe caps lock, you don't need that notification. You can turn that feature off. Here's one for num lock, scroll lock, etc. We can turn these on and off. Some of them might not mean much to you just now, but if you are in the habit of highlighting cells to quickly get a total or an average, you might also want to consider getting a minimum and a maximum as well, without writing formulas, even a numerical count. So you can change these at different times. If I click outside of this checked area now, you'll see with column I still being highlighted, I know the highest particular revenue here for any one item, 649,000. We see the total again off to the left, a minimum, a count of how many of those cells have numbers, and so on. This is useful information. And if I go to another worksheet called Profits, maybe someone has just asked me, what did we do in the second quarter here in terms of sales? I probably could do that math in my head, but with the numbers highlighted, I can see at the bottom of the screen that's 1,040. Since these are in thousands, that's actually 1,040,000. Second quarter expenses, highlight these. Over on the right, 830,000. With these various features. So the status bar keeps us informed as to the number totals for different cells that we might have highlighted. Anytime you highlight two or more cells, and by highlight we mean with the mouse, you point to a cell, hold down the left mouse button, and then possibly drag left or right to highlight other cells. We call that highlighting. Bottom of the screen gives us some interesting and worthwhile totals. Now, to the right of that are three other buttons. The one immediately to the right, called Normal, gives us the typical Excel view. The next button to the right is called Page Layout. And this is handy as we start to work with different data. Sometimes we're about to print this. We can put in headings here. This is covered later in the printing section of this course. And the button to the right of that is called Page Break Preview. This is handy at times you're ready to print a particular worksheet and you realize that the page breaks might not be where you want, and you can move these lines around to adjust that. That's probably going to come later for many of you, but we can click the button on the left of the three back to normal. And in the lower right corner we see a zoom slider bar. As you work with Excel, a lot of times you don't care what the actual percent is. You want to see the data larger, so you can drag this rightward. You can also click the little plus to the right, zoom in, or the minus on the left, zoom out. And of course you can use the slider bar. When you click the minuses and pluses, it changes the percent view by 10%. Now, most of the time you don't really care. You're just either trying to see the data larger, or, as I switch to the worksheet to the far left, the home products revenue, maybe we want to see more of the entire worksheet. There's a table to the right. Let's zoom out a little bit. Now, at certain points it becomes too small to read. At other points, perhaps it's so large that you can't see too much as you zoom in. But feel free to use that frequently and easily. It has no impact whatsoever on the data, but it does facilitate how you view the worksheet. If somebody's looking over your shoulder to see this data better, you probably want to zoom in like this. That's pretty large. Or this way. That's easy to use. So many features here in the status bar at the bottom of the screen. And once again, remember that when you highlight numerical cells, for example, I'm interested in just bamboo towels here. I'm highlighting this data. I want to know what the total sales are there. 314,000. If you're not seeing the numbers you want down here, remember, simply right-click and adjust the presence of these checks. At different times, you might want to come back here too and reconsider what's being shown and what isn't being shown. The status bar located at the bottom of the screen. Very helpful. Whether you're using a mouse or a trackpad, moving the mouse or moving a finger on the trackpad moves what we call the cursor around the Excel screen. I'm simply moving this in a circle right now. I'm using a mouse. This is referred to as the cursor. In its typical look, much of the time, is what we call a three-dimensional plus. Now, at different times, this pointer changes. If I slide leftward and put it on a boundary between rows, notice how we see a two-way up-down arrow. As I slide this on the boundary between columns B and C, up between the letters there, it's a two-way left-right arrow. If I go down to cell B3, or any cell, and point to its corner, the mouse pointer changes from a three-dimensional plus into what we call a crosshairs or a thin plus. So the mouse pointer changes. As we slide it into the ribbon menu system, notice how it becomes an arrow. So the pointer, whether you're using mouse or cursor, does change its appearance at different times. Now, it's not uncommon, in fact, it's quite common when you work with Excel, that a workbook has more than one worksheet in it. And you want to become familiar with workbooks that have different worksheets and how to navigate between sheets. Even if you don't know anything about how to put data into Excel or how to manipulate it, you should at least become familiar with the idea that if a workbook has different sheets in it, you can simply point to another sheet, click the left mouse button, and see that sheet. I'm doing with customers here. You can also press Control, Page Down, hold down Control, and with it held down, press the Page Down button to move one sheet to the right. You want to have a certain level of confidence that says, in any workbook, I can get to this sheet or that sheet. So we see the sheet tabs at the bottom. If you'd like to move leftward, we can do this with Control, Page Up. I think for many people, it's much more common to use the mouse pointer. It seems to make sense. But we want to be sure to be able to switch sheets quickly and easily as we look at a workbook. If you have another workbook open, you can go to the View tab in the ribbon, and off to the right you'll see a button called Switch Windows. Now when you click this button, you'll see other workbooks if they're open. So I've got another workbook open called Getting Started. We've seen this one before in prior movies. Another workbook out there, just an empty one. Why do I have it open? Well, maybe I'm going to copy data here. Or maybe I'm going to start something brand new, but I don't want to close other files. You can certainly have more than one workbook open at a time. It's not exactly recommended, but at the same time, it makes good sense at certain points to have different workbooks open. Not only because you're copying data back and forth between them, which you might do at different times, but sometimes you're just working on two projects. You need to have both files open. So we can always go to the View tab, switch windows, and go to a different workbook that's currently open. Back and forth here. And the more you work with different workbooks, you begin to have a sense that seeing different worksheets is just the norm. It's quite common, as we're seeing here, different worksheets within the same workbook. Remember, click the tab or press Control, page down to move rightward or leftward. The Excel menu system is extensive, and it can be intimidating at times. There's so many commands, not only on the Home tab, but the Insert tab, Page Layout tab, all these other tabs, so many choices. You're relatively new with Excel, let's say, and you're trying to figure out how to do something. You're just not quite sure what to do. For example, I want a new row to separate profits and YTD profits. Make this stand out a little bit better here by having an empty row below it. So I'm not sure what to do. I'm going to go to row 7 here. Now, do I go to the Insert tab up here? I'm looking for insert a column. It says column, but not row. So you're just not sure what to do. Now, not foolproof, but yet very handy, is the right mouse button. I'm going to right-click on row 7. Now, I'm not sure what this is going to give me, but it shows me some commands. It also activates what's called the mini toolbar. On the mini toolbar, we see a lot of buttons that are available on the Home tab. And for the moment, on my screen right now, the Home tab isn't visible, so it might be handy to use some of these. I don't really want to do formatting right now, but at other times I might. The main thrust of the right mouse button is Show a Shortcut Menu. Now, what is it I'm trying to do? I need to insert a new row. Now, there's Insert. Is this a good guess or not? Well, let's try it. Maybe if not, we can undo it. Insert. That's it. Now, later I might find out that there is a command on the Home tab out here called Insert, which could allow me to insert cells or rows or columns. So perhaps I could have gone there had I known that. But maybe I was more inclined to go to the Insert tab up here in the ribbon because it actually says Insert. So, not foolproof as I suggested earlier, but handy and also context sensitive. If I've got some data highlighted here, like this, and I right-click, there's Insert, but it's got 3 dots behind it. What does that mean? Click Insert. This does provide an option for inserting an entire row. It also gives me something else I hadn't thought about, shifting these cells and only these cells downward. Now, I don't really want to do that here, but possibly I could. The point again is that the right mouse button pares down our list of possible choices, things we might want to do at any given time. So right-clicking a row gives us some choices for insert, and although it doesn't say row, as we saw earlier, it allows us to insert a row. But on a different worksheet, the one called 2015 Home Products Revenue, clicking this, we might want to add a column. If I right-click column D here, insert here means insert a column, even though it doesn't say it. Now, as it turns out, maybe later I don't need that there. How do I get rid of it? I can right-click column D and delete it. Now, if you right-click certain other features, for example, a sheet tab at the bottom, if I right-click a sheet tab, a totally different set of choices, although we see some of the same words, but here insert means insert a new sheet, delete a sheet, change the tab color. So the right mouse button provides us with context-sensitive help, always providing a shortcut menu. And at any time we can do this. Right-click an icon in the ribbon, and you might have seen this in an earlier movie, we get an option to add that button to the quick access toolbar, or jump right into other features as well. So the right mouse button always provides us with a shortcut menu, and when we're working with cells, for example, these cells here, highlight those, right-click, and I could be using the mini toolbar here for formatting features, or possibly use some of the other features that I want to use here. Maybe I just want to highlight those, make them stand out for the moment, make them bold. Or off to the right here, I could also change the font. Like that. Maybe I'll keep it that way for a while, maybe not. But we've got that quick capability to see not only the shortcut menu, but also the mini toolbar. Anytime we use the right mouse button, we'll see those kinds of menus. If you'd like to create a brand new workbook, you can simply press Control N. Think of N for new, the letter N. Hold down Control, press the letter N. And you're likely to see a workbook with a name like Book 1, possibly Book 2, depending upon which other workbooks might already be open. But there's another way to start a workbook, and this is going to give you a quick start on a lot of different kinds of workbooks that you might be considering. The File tab in the ribbon has an option called New. There's that choice for blank workbook that we achieved with Control N, but look at some of the other choices out here. Personal budget, PayPal. If you're looking at your screen right now, you might be seeing a slightly different list or maybe in a different order, but here are some frequently used, based on Microsoft analysis, kinds of worksheets, workbooks that you might be interested in, and lots of choices here. And not only the ones we're initially seeing, but you'll notice up here, suggested searches, business, personal, searching for online templates. The beauty of these is that they look attractive for the most part. One or two of them here and there is going to catch your eye. Maybe you've been trying to put together an expense report. Here's one that's already started. Let's click this. Sounds interesting, sounds worthwhile. Click Create. Not only will this save you a ton of work, but it has formulas built in automatically. So on a certain date, certain account description, maybe we'll just put in an amount here. Maybe you spent $25 on a meal here. It's got a total off to the right. You see what's happening over here. Maybe you spent $15 on gas here. We see how this is being totaled at the bottom and on the right-hand side. There are formulas off to the right. You may or may not understand how they're working, but you might get some insight into that. And as you look at this, you think, one day I could probably do something like this on my own without needing this. But not only do you get ideas, this may be pretty much what you need. You've got your own choices here. Maybe you don't need this row here or this row. Maybe you don't need this second row here. Right-click and delete that. You might have seen that command. So you do have control over this. You can take advantage of the built-in formulas, redesign it, maybe delete this column, that column, make it work for you. It's one of many, many choices here. So remember, Control N to create a new Excel workbook, or File tab in the ribbon, New, and based on one of the templates here, start building your own workbook based on one of these. Excel's built-in help is extensive and available to us in a variety of ways. If we simply, for example, on the Home tab, point to a button, B for bold, not only do we see a brief description, but also a keystroke shortcut if it exists. So Control B, and for italic, Control I, Control U for underline, and so on. And as we slide over some topics, sometimes we see no description. That simply says no borders in effect. Slide over this button, and so on. Often you'll see a choice called Tell Me More. What is this fill color option all about? Tell me more. And a help screen appears, and we're about to see some information on the fill color icon. And sometimes this is relatively fast, sometimes not. There we are, description. We might want to print this. There's a print icon button right there. Sometimes we'll see references to other related features, sometimes not, and we can close this at any time. As we slide over some features like conditional formatting, maybe a longer explanation, maybe a graphic, and once again, possibly a Tell Me More. You don't always see the Tell Me Mores, but sometimes it's handy. And occasionally, like on the Data tab, some features, quite a long description. Here's text to columns, quite a bit of information there. And so we learn as we start to use the software. Some of these features we might never use. We'll also discover that some, like Flash Fill, a relatively new feature, it has a keystroke shortcut too. And at any time, we can click a button up here, Tell me what you want to do, the light bulb. In prior versions of Excel, we'd see a question mark in the upper right-hand corner. You can also activate this feature by pressing Alt-Q. Click right here. Now maybe I'm interested in some sorting or filtering. Maybe it's filter. I type in filter. We see some choices below this. They may or may not be close to what we want, but notice this, Get Help on Filter. Click this. And we get a help screen related to some various filter features, maybe a lot more than we would have anticipated. And here too, we're not sure maybe which one at first, maybe it's this one here, and once again, more descriptions. And of course, like before, we could have printed this, or after reading it, maybe we understand what's going on, that's good enough, we'll close this. This feature is also available on commands that are not immediately present. Back on the Home tab, we might want to do some searching. There's a Find and Select button. Do we want to find something, replace data? As we slide over replace, for example, reminder that it's Control H, find here, Control F. Let's go to special. Nothing pops up there. Occasionally we see nothing. This is going to happen. That simply repeats something. And so not always do we see this help, but certainly many times. Here's data validation. Doesn't say much there. However, on the data tab, if we see data validation, there's a description there for sure, and a tell me more. And at any time, as you're working with Excel, the traditional help shortcut F1 is active. Throughout Microsoft products and a lot of other software as well, and it has been for years, the F1 key. At any time, press it. The help screen appears, type in the topic. You've heard about these spark lines. What's that all about? Do I need to know anything about these? What are they? I saw it in the menu, and some features on that. So at any time, we can get to help. One other feature here, not exactly helpful, but part of this system. Tell me what you want to do. Click here. I might start with spark lines again. Notice the features below might be where I'm headed, maybe not. I'll keep typing. Spark lines changed a little bit. There's another button here, Smart Lookup on Spark Lines. And this takes us into a panel on the right-hand side called Insights. What we might get is a generic description of that, but in a certain sense, we're outside of Microsoft right now, possibly using Wikipedia, the Bing search, whatever, but we're out, so to speak, on the web looking at other features out there. And they might not necessarily be related to Excel. We could make this wider, of course, if we wanted to. How about more out here? Tell me more about spark lines. And this is leading us in a lot of different directions. Sometimes maybe overkill, a lot more than we needed to know here. But that's another option, the Insights panel. And once again, that's brought up when we click in the Tell Me What You Want to Do panel, just to the right of the light bulb. Click in there, type in the feature. I've heard about this waterfall chart. What's that all about? Immediately we see something right here. We could go down that path, see some images. Maybe that by itself is helpful. And we can click that. More stock charts, we get some information there. Or Smart Lookup on waterfall. Now here we're likely to learn about Niagara Falls or something. It's quite possible. Yes, there we see them. We can see how this might lead us into a different direction completely. Nevertheless, I think you can see at different times the fallback is always F1, the function key F1. A little more pertinent is the idea that on a certain feature or command, maybe flash fill, you've heard about it, there's a description. There's no tell me more on that one. How about remove duplicates? Not there. Data validation, yes. These are most helpful. Leads us right in there. Remember, we could also have gotten here by typing in to the right of the light bulb as well. So help available in a variety of different ways in Microsoft Excel.